Hello and welcome to the latest edition of Lunchtime Learning. I'm delighted to be joined by another Australian guest today, Charlotte Pascoe from Stockdale and Leggo, who is the CEO and also has 6 of her own branches as well. So
Yes.
I have the pleasure of meeting Charlotte in London. I can't remember how many years ago. Through Steve Carroll, and so thank you, Steve. And I think we're meeting in a couple of weeks over in Aric as well. So looking forward to seeing you in person again. So thank you for coming on. How are you?
Pleasure. Thank you.
So how did you get into agency and real estate?
I had tried everything else, to be honest with you. I was 21, 22 and had tried everything from working in television production companies, daycare centres, hospitality, everything. And I called my mum and I said, I still can't work it out. I tried my hat at university. I said, I don't know what to do. I just can't find my thing. And she said, I reckon you'd be really good at real estate. And I went, give it a crack. So I opened up the Yellow Pages, the phone book, and found a company that I knew the name of in an area that was one of the most affluent areas in Melbourne. And I gave them a call and I said, hi, I don't have any experience, but I'd actually really like to give it a go, wondering if you have any jobs. And they said, it's really weird that you called because this morning in our sales meeting, we decided we need to split the office management role into 2. So your timing is great. Do you want to come in for an interview? And I thought, oh, that's easy. So I went in and was appointed as the receptionist. And that was 23 years ago. So obviously I was, I'm going to say that I was 7 because I'm still in my 30s. But yeah, so it just kind of grew from there. And I, through my career, was reception. I was in property management. I was in BDM, did a bit of sales. I sort of tried my hat at everything. And ended up in the corporate position, and here I am.
So let's start from the beginning. Reception. So obviously that gave you loads of great skills, customer service experience. So what were the lessons that you did learn at the start that have stood you in good stead today?
I think the receptionist role is one of the, if not the most important role within an organisation, because you are effectively the first person they speak to. And the importance of the customer service journey, the customer experience, I think became really obvious at that point, because as a receptionist, you've got the capacity to meet and greet in a really friendly way and take them and change their behaviours. If someone's not available, how do you resolve it? So I think conflict management as well. Often people call up and they're frustrated. And so you sort of have to calm them down in a way that you're not answering the questions per se, I guess, because you don't know the answers to the questions, but making them feel like they've been heard. I think being on reception was great. I really enjoyed my time there because it gave me a great insight into the workings from a helicopter view, where you're not sitting there pigeonholed into a department. You got to learn all of the different parts. And I was early 20s, and having my weekends and being able to go out drinking and not have a care in the world was probably my number one priority. So not having to work weekends or do any of that sort of thing was brilliant. Back in the day, getting paid next to nothing, I think meant, I can remember we used to get paid on the 6th of each month, and I was reminiscing with a previous colleague the other day. We used to get paid on the 6th of each month, and if we had enough money to buy a pizza on the 5th, then that was great because I had $3 pizzas. And if you had enough money to buy a Coke, then you were absolutely loaded for the month. So we were all living on the breadline. But it was a really good way into the industry to get a good feel of all different parts of the business.
Okay, so property management, lessons learned from that.
I'm not naturally a organised and thorough person, but in property management, you have to learn to be. So I think for me, obviously relationship building, property management, it's not like a sales transaction where you're in a relationship for, let's call it 4 to 6 weeks. It's not speed dating, it's a full-on relationship. So you really have to focus on those relationships and have great communication skills. You have to build trust which goes, it takes time to build trust, but you can lose it pretty quickly. I think I learned a lot about accountability, where if I'd made a mistake, get on the front foot, tell the client you've made the mistake. And if you've got that relationship, you acknowledge the mistake or whatever it might be, or I forgot to do this or what have you, but here is my solution. And I think that helped me work through, what did I do? What do I need to do better next time? And how do I fix the problem? I think I got quite good at that as a property manager. But as I said, I think my personality is not naturally an overly organised, systemised person. I'm kind of here, there and everywhere. So I had to teach myself ways to overcome what my natural tendencies were. Things like don't have too many tabs on the internet, don't write too many emails at the same time, make sure that you close things off each day. And that sort of, I guess, put me in good stead for the rest of my career, where I know what I have to do, when I have to do it, and the best way to overcome what my natural tendencies are.
Okay, thank you. You answered all my questions there perfectly without me asking the question, but thank you. You talked about building trust. Okay, that's a massive thing. So, obviously in Australia, you're licensed. In the UK, there's no licensing whatsoever. So you can be a butcher one day and a estate agent the next day. How do you build that trust?
I'm a big fan of, and I live by this, authenticity and transparency. I think you need to make sure that when you're dealing with a client, don't try and be something that you're not. I think owning mistakes and having the hard conversations, they're the ones that you tend to want to avoid. But the sooner you get on the front foot with it and say, look, I'm so sorry, as I said, this is what's happened, people trust you 50 times more, because next time if something comes up and you say, look, this is not what's happened, this is what's happened, or I've tried, or whatever it might be, because you've owned the mistake or you've owned the situation previously, I think people tend to be a lot more trusting that if you're going to make a mistake, if something happens, you'll own it. So when you do say, no, that's not what's happened, this is actually what's transpired, they believe you. You talk about a trust bank. For every piece of communication, every making things, the invisible visible as well. I think if you don't communicate with your client, they don't know what you're doing. Then when you say, oh, I've done all of these things, because they've called you because you haven't told them, and you go, oh, I did it all, there's an element of, but did you? Or are you just telling me that because I've caught you out in it? So I think being proactive in the communication is a really important piece in building trust. You've got to make the invisible visible. And when it's visible, they know what you're doing, and they believe you a lot more.
Actually, that's a really interesting point, because especially in the UK, I don't know what it's like in Australia. I actually don't think the consumer understands what realtors, real estate agents actually do. And I think the majority of consumers think that estate agents just put a property in the portal and that's it. And actually just explaining every single thing you do. I mean, I remember I was at the gym, and this is before COVID, and there was two estate agents talking there, and they were having this long conversation, and then they left. And then there was a member of the public's there, and he said, God, estate agents are a joke. All they do is put a property on Rightmove and they get X amount. And I said to the person, do you really believe that? And he said, yeah, I do. And I said, have you got 2 minutes? And sadly for him, he said yes, and he never's going to get that 2 minutes back. And I went through his 54 things what an estate agent does. And he was, oh, wow, I didn't realize all of that. So now I understand that. And it's all about educating the consumer what exactly we do. So how can you do that? How can you, educate the consumer for them to understand, actually we play a major part in potentially changing their life and making a massive, massive difference.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's the same, like in sales, particularly in Australia, you put a property on the market, particularly when the market's good, it sells within a couple of weeks. They fork over $10,000, $15,000, $20,000, whatever it might be. And they're like, what the hell was that for? They don't see all the other stuff. And I think people won't value your fee if they don't see value in what you do. So if somebody's saying there's no value, I can't, why would I pay that much money? I've overpaid. Then you haven't taken them on the journey. And I think even if for us as agents, we do it every day. For us, it's just another transaction. It's one of whatever. And I think when you're a real estate agent and then you become a consumer, you suddenly see the disparity between what you do and what you see is the first thing. So if you haven't gone through that journey, it's really interesting to go through that journey, but taking note of how much information you have. Because when people don't know what you're doing, they don't see what you're doing, you have to make the invisible visible. So that comes down to as simple as saying, during the first week of this campaign, if it's sales, or during the leasing process of finding you a renter, I just need you to understand what we're going to do. So I'm just going to talk you through some pieces. At these points, I'm going to communicate what we're doing, but I need you to know that there is a lot of work that goes in behind the scenes. So if I'm not communicating with you every single day, if it's not an every day, depending on where you're at in that journey, but I need you to know that I'm going to be organising this. There's going to be a huge amount of toing and froing. Same as, during a negotiation, or if there's maintenance along the way, if it's a rental property, whatever it might be, you need to talk the people through every piece of the journey. And there's a company I used to work for, Melbourne Real Estate in Melbourne, quite an extraordinary business. And, 12 years ago, 15 years ago, we really pioneered the leasing of big projects. And we spent a lot of time when we were bringing new staff in, educating them on, if there is a new building, there's going to be building defects, and you're going to spend hours dealing with builders and tenants and trying to get access and trying to fix these things and what's under, there's a huge amount that goes into it. 3 months when the way the Victorian, because Australia's great in that every state has its own laws. So in Victoria, you can enter a property after the first 3 months and every 6 months to do an inspection on a rental property. So if you go through that property with an owner and they go, oh yeah, everything's great, what have you been doing? And you're sitting there going, oh my God, this property has nearly broken my soul because I've had the tenant calling 50 times, the builder hasn't done this. And then the owner suddenly goes, oh, I didn't know any of that. Then you feel exhausted and drained from this relationship, and they haven't even been part of that relationship. So just talking them through every piece of the journey. And if they don't want to know along every piece of the journey, letting them know what you're doing. Would you like me to update you throughout every step, or are you comfortable by me telling you what I'm going to do? And once I've done these 10 things, I'll call you and confirm that they're all done. Suddenly they're seeing value. And when they see value, they never question the fee. The only time they might come back to you is if they're struggling financially. Well, that's a different conversation. But if they're seeing the value, they're happy to pay for it because they know how much work you're putting in to get them the result, whatever that result is.
Okay, so you mentioned communication. So again, what do you find are the best forms of communication? I love the word you keep on saying, invisible, visible. So how do you keep on making the invisible visible?
I think one of the very first conversations when you're dealing with a client is, what is the best way for me to communicate with you, and who do I communicate with within the partnership? I think so often we forget that. We assume that they want an email, or we assume they want a call or a text message. We assume they want to call once a week, once a day, whatever it might be. And we assume that the first person we speak to is the person we should speak to throughout that journey. And all of those assumptions, there's going to be a piece in that puzzle that's most likely going to be incorrect. So having the conversation at the very, very beginning, and, I've used before a communication plan. Can we just sit down and work out what's our plan? I even have a form that I created. How many times a week do you want to hear from me throughout this journey? Let's say it's a sales journey. How many times a week do you want to hear from me? Every day, once a week, or only when something happens? I want to hear from you every second day. Great. We're going to write that down. I'm going to communicate with you every second day. Out of the two of you, we all know that the husband and wife, we think that they talk, but they kind of forget to talk. And then all of a sudden we're having a conversation with a wife who's calling up 2 weeks later saying, I can't believe you haven't called me. It's like, God, I've been speaking with your husband every second day, but I didn't confirm that that's my point of contact. So who within your relationship, this situation, who is going to be my one source of truth and your source of truth? Can you speak to the wife every second day? Great. Do you want that by email? Do you want phone calls? Do you want messages? What do you want this to be? Actually, can you just send me an email every second day? Great. I'm going to communicate with you, Stephen, but I'm going to copy in your wife because I just want to make sure she's on the same page. WhatsApp group chats. Do you want me to create a little group chat so we can all communicate and we're all on the same page? But if I assume that I need to speak to someone in a certain way or a certain amount of frequency, then you're just making it up, thinking that you're right. I think the other thing is you do get those people who say, can you just give me a call? The most important thing after that call is to follow up with a written communication, just confirming our conversation. We've had X amount. Now, that could go in the WhatsApp chat, could be by text message, depending on how they want to be communicated. But if you're going through and you're confirming all, the who, the how often, as in frequency, the how, if you put all of these things together, you will never have a client at the end say, I never heard from you, or I heard from you too much, or you spoke to the wrong person, or you didn't hear me. Because you pull out that little communication agreement that you start at the beginning and you say, well, actually, this is how you told me to communicate, and I appreciate you wanted something different, but you just needed to let me know that it wasn't working.
Brilliant. Thank you. Something else you mentioned that's just got me thinking, induction. So I know we skipped out a lot of your business development, and then maybe we come back to, your role as CEO, because that'd be interesting to talk about culture and but what are you doing with induction? So, having an induction plan, loads of people, here you go, here's your desk, here's your phone, get on with it. So, what is an exceptional induction plan?
I think it depends on the role, and it depends on the setup within the business. The old, here's a phone, best wishes, on your bike. This is how I used to do it 20 years ago. So it's the same. I think the first key thing, we actually just had our directors retreat in Port Douglas, which is very tough, beautiful part of the world. And one of the big key things is be the leader that you wish you had. So if you don't have the setup within your organization on how to bring somebody in, and it's okay because I didn't get that, or this is how it happened for me, I can assure you that somebody coming into the business today, particularly somebody who's new to the industry and potentially younger, they expect to get inducted properly. They want to know where things are, and it makes your life so much easier. So I think it's firstly understanding what role they're coming into, understanding what your expectations are. I think setting those expectations, we overlook that sometimes and say, oh, it'll be all right. It's not okay. You need to set out, this is the expectations that I have. Asking the one key thing as well, what's your expectations of me? What do you need from me to make sure you're successful? Are you somebody who is analytical? Do you want to read all the books? Do you want to watch the videos and learn it? Or are you an on-the-job training person where if we do something together through using this tech platform, do you feel that that's going to get you the best outcome? Don't try and teach someone in a way that you're going to learn. Teach them in how they're going to learn, because if you can teach them in their way, in their language, they're going to learn so much faster and they're going to be a lot more able, a lot faster. But I think it's just mapping out a plan, setting goals, doing all that sort of stuff. And if you're not doing those things when somebody comes into the business, we've got someone joining our organisation at the moment, and we've been sitting down saying, well, what's our expectation? What do we need from you? What do you need? It's a conversation. And obviously this comes through from the interview, because by the time they're coming on board, you want to make sure that you're on the same page. But I think if you've got those expectations, it's much easier to work towards them together. And also, if it's not working, coming back to those initial expectations and giving them the platform to be able to say, we talked about this at the beginning. I really needed this from you, Charlotte, and I didn't get that. How do we redesign it so I can get where I want to go? And coming back to that on a regular basis throughout your one-on-ones. How are you feeling you're going? Is there anything else you need help with? But yeah, I think setting expectations, KPIs within that role, how long it's going to take to get to that point. I think in real estate sales, we often find people come in and go, awesome, if I do real estate sales, I'm going to be earning 6 figures and I'm going to be driving an Audi and it's going to be awesome and it's going to take me 3 weeks to get there. It takes time. You've got to build a database. So giving the expectations of how long it's going to take them to get there and the work that's required to get them there is probably the most important think peace when you're bringing somebody into your business.
Brilliant. You talked about one-to-ones there. How frequently are you having those one-to-ones?
This is something that I, in a formal sense, I haven't done well, and I actually talked to the team about this last week. So good question, reminding me that I have to hold myself accountable to this. We've had some changes in structures within our team, and I speak to the team often about what we're needing to achieve and where we're going. I think it depends on the role and it depends on the experience. There are some people where it might be once a month, once a quarter, but then if it's a new person, it's probably going to be more like weekly. And I think the most important question to ask people at the very beginning, and there's a wheel, and you can usually tell if somebody's not doing well because their performance will indicate that they're not doing well personally. But I think the first question is, scale of 1 to 10, how are you feeling? What's going on? Where are you at? And if you're not having those conversations at the start, it's very hard to, if someone turns around and says, I'm really emotional, I just had a fight with my partner, they're leaving, whatever it might be, it's probably not the right time to sit down and go, well, your performance in the last couple of weeks has been crap. I feel you suddenly go, oh, okay, now I understand why your performance has been like that. So what scaffolding can we put around you? How do we help you navigate through whatever it is that's going on in your personal life so that it's not impacting the business? And it's finding that fine line between making sure that the personal doesn't impact the business. But if they go, oh, I'm a 9, everything's great. And you're like, cool. Well, we've had 58 complaints. This is what's going on. So we are like daylight apart from reality and what you think is going on. But I think you've really got to understand where they're at, how they're feeling, how they think they're performing as well, and give them an opportunity to do that. And if you start the one-on-one with those types of questions, you can then really deep dive into, okay, well, you're saying that you're not making the calls. Can you talk to me about why? What's going on? Why are we not doing those lead generation calls? And I know the structure in Australia is quite different with how the agencies are run. I spent a couple of weeks when we met, I think it was just before COVID, actually. Yeah. A couple of months before COVID hit, I was over there. And I was blown away by the differences in how we do real estate versus how you do real estate. But I think, just checking in first and foremost, they're people first, and you'll get more out of the people if you understand what's going on behind the scenes.
Okay, lovely. So what would you say is working well for you at the moment?
Living by my, as I said earlier, authenticity and transparency. Stepping into a role of CEO particularly was challenging. The business has been around for 85 years at the time, and I needed to find my, how I fit into the whole equation, and that was challenging. And I think when I didn't know who I was or how I was going to be within the industry, I found it really hard to be myself. And I joke that I tried to be a 60-year-old male for a long time, and I couldn't do it. So I had to settle for being myself. And I think the moment I gave myself permission to do things a little bit differently and be really genuine to myself, I think that's when we've been able to get the most amount of traction. And that's when the business is starting to, really take shape into what it is now.
So you talked about being a 60-year-old male. So how was the response, becoming the CEO of a 85-year-old company? How was it received, and how did you overcome those those ill-judged perceptions?
Well, at the time, we've got 100,000 real estate agents in Australia, and there was one other female CEO in the industry in Sydney. And so I felt very out of my comfort zone. And I think it was my preconceived ideas on what these successful CEOs looked like. The organisation that I stepped into the CEO role, it was I was the general manager beforehand, and the one thing that was my source of truth was how they responded. And the beautiful thing is that the response within the organisation was really supportive, regardless of history, past, all that sort of thing. I think I'd built a relationship with some of them didn't appreciate me stepping into that role. And horses for courses, you can't please all the people all the time type attitude. I made peace with that. But I think because I'm navigating who I am in the industry and I'm not fitting a mold or trying to be something else, I think it's been really well received. And, you know, there will always be people who disagree or don't align with who I am or how I operate, and that's okay. But I know that what we're carving out within the industry, I want to be really clear that we are a certain part within the industry, and there will be people who align with that slightly different way of looking at things. And those people will feel like they can flourish. You know, there's hundreds of different brands and iterations of real estate agencies in Australia, and there's some that fit within one mold and some that fit within another mold, and that's okay. But it's really about finding our people that align with our values, and we're very firm on those values and how we treat people. You know, culture for us, you touched on that before. Culture is number one. Your people are your culture, and the culture isn't just what I say and what I do and how I behave. It's not just how our people behave, but it's also what they walk past. So we're very conscious about making sure everybody is treated with respect. I created a respect policy to make sure that, you know, we're really clear on who we are.
Fantastic. How long did you do that yourself, or did you work together as a team to come up with that?
The respect policy?
Yeah.
I took on bits and pieces from people. I had a couple of people specifically come in. I wanted to create a manifesto of what that looked like. And the manifesto actually turned into a letter. And I wrote a letter about what I will promise our network. We've got offices across Victoria. But it was also around what I expect in return. So I will give you support. I will give you authenticity. I will go in and I will do everything I can. But in saying that, I also expect that you too will do the same for the people around you, and that you will give us the respect. So it ended up being a letter that I sent to everyone in our network. I think there's 400 people, and they all got a copy of the letter, and it basically says, this is who I am, this is how I'm going to operate. You might not like it. We had one office leave shortly after. I don't know if it's related, but it was very much about the kind of behaviours that we expect as an organisation. So
fantastic. So biggest challenges at the moment in the Australian market, what are you seeing?
We have high interest rates at the moment, which is making it really difficult for people to borrow. Affordability, our inflation hasn't come down yet. We were hit with a huge number of interest rate rises month after month after month, and that made it very difficult. In addition to that, we've had a rental crisis where, particularly in Victoria, a lot of owners have been penalised for owning rental properties, and it's become unaffordable to hold them. And because they can't afford to hold them, they're selling them, and that's creating a rental shortage and a crisis here where there's not enough properties for the people. So we've been stuck in this cycle where people don't want to sell because they can't find somewhere to rent, and because they can't find somewhere to rent, you know, they also can't find something to buy because there's not enough properties on the market, because people won't put their properties on the market because they've got nowhere to go. So particularly in Victoria, it's been really tough. There's been a lot of changes. We went from the most livable city to the most lockdown city pretty quickly. And, you know, so there's a lot of industries that have suffered. There's a lot of people who are still trying to sort of get themselves back on. But what it's done is it's left the state of Victoria with a diabolical debt. And so the government is putting in, I think we've hit, I think they've introduced at least 50. I'm not sure what the number is now, but they just keep hitting people with taxes. And so there's just this affordability issue, and the people who are copping a lot of that, unfortunately, are the investors that have propped up the market. So I think we've got a long way to go in Victoria at this point, but everyone's really passionate about trying to fix it. We've just got to get things moving in the right direction.
So what are you doing for lead generation to try and get properties on, find new landlords if there are new landlords? You know, are you finding anybody who wants to, can't sell, that are looking to rent, or actually is too draconian there to actually do that?
In terms of the rental market, the stats were from our aggregator realestate.com last week, and there's two sort of main websites that we have, Domain and Real Estate. 19% are coming back on market. So for every 5 properties that's an investment property, only 1 is being replaced. So trying to find owners, new investors, is tough because a lot of people are getting out of investment and investing in other states just because it's, you know, perceived to be the most expensive to hold. Not necessarily property value, but the holding costs of that property in Victoria are so much higher. So trying to get new investors in it'd be great if we can get some, because all of the portfolios are just diminishing at a rapid rate. In terms of lead generation, you know, there's some amazing products here in Australia around lead generation. We've got some, Rita is one, for example, where it's cleaning databases. But database management is one of the biggest issues that our industry faces. We're not great as an industry in Australia managing databases. So lead generation, our focus as an organisation at the moment has been very much around, you can wash and clean the data and tell you which ones are accurate. But in order to insert data and fill the information that's missing, it really requires a phone call. So that means clean the data, work out if you've got 10,000 people sitting in there, 5, 4, 3,000 of them are okay. Start calling those ones, make sure that you've got the accurate tags, because once you've got that, you can start to create some lead generation and database management. I think, you know, you can plug something into good data, but if it's bad data in, bad data out, you're getting nothing out of it anyway. So that database piece is really key at the moment.
Couldn't agree more. What about the stay in touch policy? Most people, buyers in the UK, go into witness protection. They never hear from their agents after they've bought. So they
I know, that blows my mind. It just is, yeah.
So give us a stay in touch policy that will work in the UK. No pressure now, Charlotte.
How to revolutionise it. This is something that I found, to be honest with you, just a little side note here, something I found amazing, that once somebody has bought from you or sold with you, that's it. They're gold. They've got a relationship with you. So for us, it's very much about who are they? And then you've got, in most CRMs, I'm assuming it's the same in the UK, you've got tags and you've got communication programs. So, you know, the anniversary card of congratulations, a year ago you bought your property is great. But we have a gentleman, as I said, Adam, who has become a multi-million-dollar agent. And the way he did it was creating 40 points of contact with every client, categorizing them accordingly. But those 40 points of contact means they remember who you are, because he was actually at our leadership retreat talking, and I think it's a really great way of explaining it. At the point of sale, they think you're amazing. You ask for a testimonial, which I hope everybody does. Tell me how wonderful I am, and you use it. You go, great. And then you do nothing with it in terms of reminding that client how great you are. So year 1, they're like, oh, this is wonderful. I remember that Charlotte was fantastic. Year 2, they're like, oh, yeah, Charlotte was really good. Year 3, they're like, yeah, Charlotte was great. Year 4, they're like, who's Charlotte? Year 5, they're like, did I even own that property? Because we're not reminding them. So sending that testimonial back to them and saying, oh, I was just going through and I realized 3 years ago we sold your house. How great. This was a testimonial. I read it, made me feel really good inside. Hope everything's well. But reminding them of that journey. But if you're not communicating with them by email, by text, and by phone, then they don't remember who you are. So when they go to sell their house in 2-3 years' time, or 5 years, or whatever it might be, they've forgotten who you are. They're not just going to remember and pick up the phone. But I think it's really important that you need to be relevant. Relevant trumps recency, is going to trump any relationship that you have in the past. So you need to stay in front of them. You need to be giving them quality communication. We are, in Australia, we love, we call it ego marketing, where it's like, I just sold a house. I just sold a house. I just sold a house. I have an Audi. I just sold a house. And no one cares, because unless they're in the mindset of real estate transactions, they don't care who we are. Unless we're giving them quality content. So what's happening in your community? Go down to a cafe, go down to a local cafe and say, see that you've just opened up. I'd love to use my database to market your cafe, would you be happy to, to do a free coffee? Absolutely. These people suddenly get all of these people that want to come through. So you create a voucher that says free coffee for anyone going to here. It's from Charlotte Pascoe. There are so many things that you can do, social media marketing, but community, go to your local council. What's happening in the council at the moment? There's so much content there. You've just got to ask for it. And if you set up these tracks and these bits of communication, then that's when you're going to be able to, when somebody, there's nothing nicer than someone picking up the phone and going, hey, Stephen, you sold my house for me 3 years ago. I really enjoyed the relationship. You've kept me up to date. I found relevant communication throughout those 3 years. Our circumstances have changed. We need to sell. Do you mind coming out and letting me know what it is? When your phone starts ringing, it means that you're communicating. Otherwise, you're trying to chase new business all the time. And cold calls are so much harder than a warm lead or a previous relationship.
Brilliant. I'm really conscious of time. Can I ask you a couple more questions? Are you okay? Have you got
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Thank you. So one of the other things I'm sure you were surprised when you came over just before COVID was how low fees are in the UK compared to how much more you get in Australia. So any tips on getting a higher fee?
I'm going to go back to what I said before. If you don't value your services and if they don't see value, then they're not seeing value in what you're saying. So if you don't see that you're worth more, they don't either. Our average fee in Australia is actually on a really good decline because it's a race to the bottom at the moment. I'll throw this in, which is really sad because it's saying that our agents are not seeing that they're worth more because they're not putting the time in. So this is where your scripts and dialogues come in. What's your point of difference? What's your superpower? Why is someone going to list and sell with you or list and rent their property with you? Because if you can't justify it, if I get everybody right now, whoever's watching this, and you say, give me 3 reasons why you're not the person next door. If you can't rattle that off, then you're already reducing your fees. You have to know why you find your value and live on that value and really believe it. And if you believe it and you're a leader, then make your team believe it. That's probably the most important thing for us is you've got to know your value. You've got to be able to tell why you. If you can't, as I said, if you can't say 3 reasons why you off the bat, that's the first place to start.
Brilliant. Thank you. Now, what about you, Charlotte? What are you doing to self-improve? Obviously, I know you're going to ARIC, and there's 30 odd speakers there, so it's going to be a great event. What do you do? Any books that you recommend?
Keller Williams, Gary Keller, The One Thing. Have you read that one? I
have, yes. Yeah. And
brilliant
also the Real Estate Millionaire from him, I think it is as well.
Yes. Yep. Those books are great industry books, but I think The One Thing is a really good book regardless. And Atomic Habits, I know a lot of people have read that as well. Atomic Habits is great. It really helps you understand, compound interest of improvement, 1% every day, where that gets you over a 12-month period. It's pretty amazing. So they're probably the books that I love. But I also love, I think I learn the most through conversations. So I'm always talking to people in our industry, always saying, let's go for lunch. What are you doing? What are you finding? How are you dealing with this? Asking as many questions as I possibly can of people who are going through that too.
Good. Well, there's a good book that I've just been recommended to. It's called If I Could Tell You Just One Thing by a gentleman called Richard Reed. And he built up Innocent Drinks from a smoothie stall in the street corner to one of the biggest successes in the UK. And he's gone round and he's spoken to loads of different Hollywood greats, industry people, sports people, and he asked one question. So I'm going to ask you that question. If you could just tell me one thing, what would it be to make a difference to other people and help other people? So what advice would you give somebody? Best bit of advice that you've ever been given?
Do you want it to be real estate related or just generally?
Entirely up to you.
Okay. It was probably my dad, and it was around relationships and how much energy you put into good and bad relationships in life. And that could be partners, friends, clients, whatever it might be. And it was, he basically said to me, just because someone doesn't love you the way that you need them to love you, or in a relationship or whatever that might be, it doesn't mean that they don't love you with everything that they have. You just have to work out if that's enough. And I've had that with me for many, many years around toxic relationships that you give and you don't get anything back. It's just about basically saying, this is who I am and how I care for the people around me and what I will do for you. And I appreciate that you do everything that you can, and that's okay. It's not that you're a bad person. It's just whether or not that's enough for me as a person. And I think that helped me gain my own self-value in relationships, and what's important to me in relationships, and being able to be very authentic. And again, that authenticity piece, being really true to who I am, and finding the right people around. And, you know, the saying is that if you've got four, if you are effectively the product of the 5 most influential people that are around you, the 5 people that you spend the most amount of time with, make sure they're good people.
Brilliant. Well, what a nice way to end. So if people want to get hold of you, Charlotte, how do they do that, please?
Probably on email, charlotte.pascoe@stockdaleleggo.com.au.
Brilliant. Well, look, thank you for your time. Look forward to meeting up with you in a couple of weeks. Thank you, everybody, for watching and listening. Please like it, share it. And I look forward to seeing you on the next one. Thanks very much. Thanks a lot, Charlotte.
Thanks a lot.